Good evening and welcome to the Kenya Wins Politics Show. I'm your host, Paul Kenjorum, and this is the Kenya Wins Podcast, the voice of a rising nation. This is the third episode that we are doing. It is a politics show. If you go back to the introductory episode that I did, I explained that I'll have 3 episodes. The first is the history show, which is the main show. And then after that, we'll do the politics show. And then we'll do the social commentary and responding to questions show. So we will do the politics show every Wednesday, and this is our first show. And being the first politics show, I will explain why we need the politics show and why what we shall be doing in the politics show. Let me explain what the show will be doing, and then I'll explain what I will do today. I said that the Kenya Wins Podcast, the voice of a rising nation, is a history podcast. Why does a history podcast need a politics show? Now, politics drives history. Therefore, rather than just covering the events of the past and leaving it at that, the politics show, the aim of the politics show is to try and empower the listeners with knowledge about why events happen the way they happen, using the historical context that we've covered. So the essence of this politics show is to, first of all, empower the listener with knowledge and skills to be able to interpret historical events unfolding right now, and to understand that the events unfolding now are part of a long chain of events that started many years ago. For this show, I will do several things. First of all, I'll give a brief history with my interaction with politics. Then I'll recap where we are today as a nation. And I will explain the approach that I'm using for 2027. And then eventually, I will explain what we shall be doing for the near future in the politics show. So if you go back to the introductory episode 00, you will see that I said that Kenya is exceptional in the region. Exceptional in the sense that we are an island of freedom and democracy in this neighborhood. And often that threatens dictators in the region, and they are quite nervous, usually, about Kenya. This week, you saw Tanzania's president, Samia Suluhu, akisema watu wanyoroshwe, vijana wanyoroshwe. Essentially what she's saying, they are making the regimes uncomfortable, or they seem to be threatening the regimes. This is not the first generation of Kenyans to agitate for things. Kenyans have always been agitators, and eventually they do get their way. It started long before independence. We are the only country in this region that actually fought for self-rule and actually had a war to fight for independence. So Kenyans have always been fighters. It's not a new thing, and it will not end today. Just because they are being threatened by a dictator, it won't end. A brief history of my interaction with politics in Kenya. First of all, I have not been an active participant in politics at all. My participation in Kenyan politics goes as far as being a witness to political events and voting. So this is my first attempt to inject my voice in the politics of this country. But however, I think it's good to say that I've always had political consciousness. And from a very, very young age, I remember the first time I became politically aware was about 2001 or 2002. I was about like 11-ish. And I remember people talking about Moi and then 2001, 2002, Moi and was retiring, and there was a lot of activity about, because that meant there was gonna be a new president. I remember also reading a political analysis by one Mutahi Ngunyi in 2002 from the Sunday Nation. My dad used to be an avid buyer of newspapers. He didn't even used to work from around home. He used to work somewhere else, but he would come home every 3 or 4 weeks, and he would bring a big bundle of newspapers he had bought. So I would just read the newspapers. Of course, okay, it's like news that is like 4 weeks or 5 weeks old, but still I was informed in that way. I remember the 2002 election and the optimism that accompanied that election. It was phenomenal. Like, it was phenomenal. They formed this big coalition that brought together all these people from DP, Democratic Party, Mwai Kibaki, from SDP, Charity Ngiru, from Ford Kenya, Wamalwa. Then Rita Raila Odinga joined with his LDP, and it won a landslide. They got like 65% of the vote. Everywhere in this country, they voted for that man, Kibaki, except maybe for Kiambu, a little bit of Northeastern, and Rift Valley. Then later, one of the things that they had agreed they will do in that grand coalition was to write a new constitution, which they did, but not in the way they had agreed or they wanted anyway. So technically, Kibaki hijacked the process with some of his ministers, and they wrote a document that was not very good at all, in fact. So I remember 2005, I was in high school. They had this referendum, and they formed two teams: the banana team, championing for the passing of the new constitution, and the orange team was saying, no, we don't want this constitution. And that's where ODM came from. Of course, the orange team won, and then later, I remember 2007, and the events, the stolen election, the tension around the country regarding the outcome, and then the formation of grand coalition government. And another thing they agreed after that was that they were going to have a new constitution. So they were able to do that 3 years later in 2010. And that was the first time I registered as a voter and voted for that constitution. It was promulgated. Again, there was a lot of optimism, almost like the optimism that accompanied the election of Kibaki in 2002. In 2003, Kenyans were rated the most optimistic people in the world. That was how phenomenal the election was. 2010, I remember the optimism in this country. People felt we are going to have a new constitution. Then, of course, events unfolded otherwise. I voted for the first time in 2013 for Uhuru Kenyatta. I was disappointed with his performance. And in 2017, I voted for Raila Odinga the first time. But remember, there was the election was nullified by Maraga and his Supreme Court. And we went back to the ballot, and I voted for Uhuru Kenyatta the second time. Later, Uhuru Kenyatta won and formed a handshake government with, not a handshake government, it was more of a cooperation agreement with Raila Odinga. And then 2022 came, and, we had William Ruto versus Raila Odinga. I voted for William Ruto. I regretted almost immediately, within 2 weeks when he appointed the cabinet, and you see names of ministers, and it's people like Murkomen and Aisha Jumwa, and you're like, okay, wow, we are so doomed. We are so doomed. Ruto's time in power has been a big disappointment, of course, to many people. In fact, even the people who knew that Ruto would not make a good president, they must be shocked at how bad he has been as a president. It's hard to justify electing Ruto, but there are several things I can say about that decision, or about what 2022 means in the context of history and in the context of how politics works in this country. Number one, William Ruto was always going to be the destiny of Kenya. There was no avoiding this man. Because for a moment, imagine Raila won 2022 and Ruto became the leader of the opposition. First of all, Raila's victory would have been marginal, just like Ruto's victory was marginal. So he would have needed a bit of backup from Ruto. Secondly, Ruto would have spent the entire 5 years on top of his vehicle criticizing this government, and there would be much to criticize. Anyway, you can see even how ODM ministers have performed. It's not like they are any different. And depicting himself as the savior of this country, preaching that he is the Messiah, and once he gets into government, he will change things. That's what he would have done. And whether after 10 years or after 5 years, he would have been elected. We would still have suffered the disaster that is this presidency. It's a bit like Donald Trump and the Americans. The forces that have stood against Trump have tried everything, but Trump was America's destiny. Like, there was no avoiding this man. He was a man for this moment. They tried everything, prosecution, the media smeared his name, sexual allegations, sexual assault, fraud, convictions, like, oh God. They threw everything they could throw at him. And still, he became the president. So that Ruto was like that. In that sense, he was like that. He was bound to become the president of Kenya at some point. It is better now, okay, not better, but anyway, that we have tasted him, be done with it, kuliko tuteseke huku mbele. So that is number one. Number two, 2022 and the election of Ruto itself was the beginning of the end of the cancer of tribalism in this country. This was the first election, I would say, that was won on a message. Okay, the message itself turned out to be a conmanship, but it was a message. And it won the hearts and minds of Kenyans. The narrative of the bottom-up message, uplifting people, those who are below, was a good message. No doubt about that. That was honestly a genius message. And he demonstrated at that time a very, very, very good understanding of the problems afflicting Kenyans. And that election was won on that message. And even if you look at the electoral map, don't look at the county map, look at the constituency map, how many votes each person got in each constituency. With the exception of Nyanza province, Ruto had widespread support in every constituency in this country. Of course, he squandered all that political capital almost immediately. I don't think he appreciated why he was elected in the first place. But nevertheless, anyway. So that's point number two. Number three, however disastrous it has been, the election of Ruto was an awakening moment for Kenyans. You can talk to young people who are 23, 24, and 2022 they would tell you they weren't even aware about who was the running mate of whom. They were completely apathetic to the political processes of this country. But since 2024, these people have awakened. And once you awaken people politically, they do not go back to sleep. You see young people, 23-year-olds, usually don't care too much about politics. They redirect their energy elsewhere. But they are awakened and they cannot sleep. They may be disillusioned. They may have despaired, even now, about the state of this country. But they are awakened. So the disaster that was 2022 election of William Ruto has had its own lessons, and in the entire broad scheme of things, it may yet come to be a turning point for this country. Now, where are we politically in this country? we have to admit that we are in a very, very bad position. Very, very bad position. Like, it's terrible. It's almost ridiculously terrible. And you can tell, you can see the signs, and that people are able to read the situation and how terrible our situation is. Just the other day, we completed the voter registration, and the numbers were extremely dismal. That tells you people are not excited. You may tell them they have the power, they have, it's their vote that counts, but people read the situation quite correctly, that we are in a desperate situation as a country. Because you look at the current government, William Ruto, he's terrible, but he's kind of collecting all the political allies he can. Well, that man doesn't sleep. You have to acknowledge that. He doesn't really sleep. He's getting allies. He will buy, he will bribe, just to get into this, to maintain his position. But then if you look at the other side, whoever is supposed to be alternative government, it's Rigathi Gachagua and his ilk, people like him. It's like the thugs on this side are competing with the thugs on the other side, and Kenyans are supposed to make a decision. Okay, how do you make that decision? Okay, what is there to smile about when that is what you are offering to the people? There's nothing to smile about there. So Kenyans are rightfully disillusioned with the political situation. They do not see somebody who offers a message of hope. All they see is players who've been in the game, playing the game just like they've been playing for a long time. That leads to a phenomena that I've seen now. Kenyans are latching onto whoever offers the smallest hope of probably being a reasonably good option. Whoever stands a reasonably good chance of winning, but also at the same time offers, a reasonably good option. You've seen it with, all these people, with Matiang'i, with Maraga, with Sifuna, with Omtata. And some of these people are actually good, but there's a level of disillusionment that is forcing Kenyans to try and, because the reality is the options that are available right now, they don't really offer much in terms of hope for the advancement of this country in a significant way. Not all of them are equally bad, of course, but in terms of having a revolutionary figure, somebody who can truly change this country, who has the talent and the ability to do politics and change this country, we are lacking. We are totally lacking. That brings me to my approach to 2027. It's based on 4 principles. Number 1, Ruto must go, and he will go. He will go. But it can never be Rigathi Gachagua. That is like, and that's like literally a twin, a Ruto twin. It can never, ever, ever be Rigathi Gachagua. So if Ruto is going, they must go together. Like, once we are finished with Ruto, making Ruto go wherever he's supposed to go, the next item on the agenda immediately should be Rigathi must go. Immediately. Because we have seen these people in power. We've seen how they behave. Even now, we can see how he's behaving. He's only useful as a tool to beat Ruto right now, but not as an option to govern this country. Because these are extremely ruthless operators, and they are the same person. And they would behave the same way in power. This is not a theory, this is not projection, this is because we have seen them in power and we've seen how they have behaved in power. So that is number 1. Number 2, we must approach 2027 as a transitory election. Whoever is elected, whoever wins, must be seen not as a solution. None of them has any solution, and in any case, in any event, because of the rot that has crept into this country's leadership structure, whoever wins will not be able to do much. You have parliament, you have the governors, you have the MCAs, you have the senators, and all these institutions, a lot of corruption has crept in and a lot of institutional decay or leadership decay, so that they are not able to offer any leadership. And a lot of conmen, in any case, whoever wins for presidency, a lot of conmen will get in because, unfortunately, one of the more ignored impacts of Ruto's presidency is that now politicians around the country fashion themselves after Ruto. It usually happens that way anyway. All other leaders follow the example set by the big leader. One of the reasons why Kibaki was so effective was that he created a good example for other leaders below him, even without his own direction, to follow. So you used to see all these CEOs of parastatals, even leaders in business, everybody follows the same template from the big leader. So if you elect a corrosive figure like Ruto, he corrodes the entire structure, the entire fabric of the society. So that you look everywhere and we seem to be beset by conmen, whether it's in private business, whether it's in public service, it's conmen everywhere. So therefore, this election that is coming must be viewed not as a solution, but as a transition moment. Kwanza tuondoe huyu, ili tuweze kufikiria vizuri about what we can do for this country, about what we want for this country. Because if he's there, there's no other conversation can happen. That conversation cannot happen. Because you see, even now, every day we are beset, every day, bombarded by bad news, scandal. Right now, if there's a scandal, if somebody steals like 5 billion, it's even barely registers anywhere in the consciousness of Kenyans. Because we are beset by deaths, by scandal, by weird, you see people making weird comments. It's like, as long as this man is there, no other conversation can happen, good or bad. So we need to, first priority, get rid of him. Then the coming election, we should see it as a transition. And whoever wins, almost immediately, he will disappoint us. But first of all, get rid of the disaster, then try to remedy the situation. That is number 2, transition. Number 3, we must now be conscious of our power in the ballot. Like I said in the introductory episode, Kenya is the only country in this region and one of 8 in Africa that can actually shape its future destiny through the ballot. In our neighborhood, no other country can do that. And we must take that power seriously. And we must deny, whoever will win, the source of power that comes with having strong parties with many representatives. They must be denied the power that they accumulate through bargaining in post-election coalition using their parties. That means for this election that is coming, the idea of voting for a party candidate should not even cross your mind. We've seen those parties. We have seen how they are used. DCP, ODM, UDM, we have seen them. These are not new creatures. We have seen how they are used by those in power. So for this election, the only way you can deny these people that power is to vote for independent candidates who are not affiliated with any party. Don't give these people power. However good they appear to be. Mtauliza Maraga, what is your party? Matiangi or Sifuna or Mtata or all these other people. Unawauliza, what is their party? Have you seen what happens with parties in this country? Wewe chagua mtu individually. Hii election inafaa sasa kuwa ya madoadoa. Unachagua huyu kutoka hapa, huyu mwingine individually. Zile siku za kusema unapiga suti, those days are gone. They've seen the disaster it is caused in this country. These parties do not mean well for us. They are merely vehicles of power. And they do not intend to do any of the things they have in their manifesto. We have seen that. They do not mean well. You might say, but we've not given ODM a chance. We have seen ODM governors in power. Are they any better than UDA governors or Jubilee governors or whatever governors or Wiper governors? They all still equally. For a moment there, we lost power for like 30 minutes, but it's back. I was making point number 3, the parties in this country and how they behave in power. We all know, we have seen these agreements they make after election. They are tools of oppression and exploitation of the people. And finally, the 4th point is we should encourage as many independent candidates as possible. You should go to an election, and if you're electing an MCA or an MP, you're given a booklet of like 27 names. Let us have options. As many people as possible. We don't want an election where we have just 2 people. Let us have options and let everybody choose whoever they want. Make an individual choice. Hata kama utamchagua kwa sababu unamjua. That is what we want in 2027. Like, whoever will win for MP, MCA, or senator should win like with 20% or 25% of the vote, because the vote is so split that nobody can get a majority. Then from there, we can use that kind of instability in the system to approach 2032. But if you have a situation where you have DCP controlling like 100 seats in parliament, UDA controlling another 150, ODM controlling 50 or 70 or whatever, you see the same situation where they'll get into a post-election power pact and share power and positions. Because the situation in this country is, there are 2 promises that are made to 2 different groups of people. For the voters, they bring a manifesto. Tutawapatia maji, tutawapatia stima, tutafanya hii kuwe bure, na hii ingine pia ni bure. Power itashuka, tutafanya hii na hii. We will create jobs. We will employ more teachers. We will employ more police. We will bring a police station here. We will build a school here, a hospital there, another market here, a dam. All these things they promise. But then there's also another group that is promised. The political players, they make promises to each other. For instance, if we were to take the Kenya Kwanza Alliance that won 2022, they made this power sharing pact promises to themselves. Tukishinda Ford Kenya, Wetangula anapata speakership. Tukishinda Amason Kingi anapata speaker ya Senate. Tukishinda Rigathi Gachagua atapata viti 7 za cabinet. Tukishinda Mudavadi was promised prime cabinet secretary. So when they win, your leverage as a voter ends at the ballot. The moment you tick that ballot, they no longer have any use for you. Now they turn to the players. And usually, whatever is promised to players is given. All those things that Ruto promised to those players, his fellow teammates, they were given. Amason Kingi got Senate Speaker. Wetangula got House Speaker. Mudavadi, Prime Cabinet Secretary. Gachagua, all those CS positions and PS positions, he got them. That is how the game works in this country. They all get their promises. What about the promise made to the voters? Now, because the voter has already given all the power to the party, they have no way to negotiate for their promises to be fulfilled. And in that manner, you go to another election without previous promises being fulfilled. So the only way you can maintain leverage is to distribute your vote. Because the reason why they are able to do this is because it's a small team with a few players, so they can divide the power resources very efficiently. But if you distribute your votes so widely and ensure that no player actually gets any significant bargaining power, that means after the election, the conflict within the power elite will mean they will need, whoever is in power, will need the support of the people to do anything. And for them to get the support of the people, they have to fulfill the promises they made to the people. But usually right now, for instance, right now, Ruto does not have to fulfill the promises he made to the people because, first of all, he has the support. He had the support of Raila Odinga. He had the support of the UDA party. He can do anything in parliament. And if you combine the power of ODM and the power of UDA, they can pass anything. But if he didn't have that comfort, that majority, he didn't have Wetangula, he didn't have Amason Kingi, he didn't. So the way to destabilize the system is to remove the ability of the key players from fulfilling their promises to their teammates. That way, politically speaking, they will be on shaky ground all the time. And when you're on shaky ground, you go back to the base. You can only solidify power by working with the base. Because there's no way you can buy all these people, all these independent candidates. You'd have to buy them individually. But if you give power to DCP, whoever will want to buy DCP MPs will not go to individual DCP MPs. It will go to Gachagua and then make a deal with Gachagua. So we cannot afford to empower any of these vehicles of power. And these parties are vehicles of power. Tuko pamoja. Are we together? Yeah? So those are the 4 principles. Now, just to restate, the priority, Ruto must go, and he will go. But never Gachagua. Number 2, we have to know that we are in a transition election. We cannot have meaningful change. We can only have marginal change, a small change, and some breathing space to enable us to think about the future of our country. Number 3, we must deny all these key players and parties bargaining power after the election. And we can only do that by encouraging as many independents as possible. Usitake kujua ati mtu anakona kiama gani, angalia mtu kama ako sawa, before umvotie. Now, my dear friends, we have a big task before us, politically speaking. I know people are disillusioned. I know people are desperate. I know people have given up on this country. And many, many people have fled this country. But the reality is, this is our country. And we cannot afford to lose it. We are the only island of democracy and freedom in this region. I know things are bad, but we cannot afford to lose it. Because this is the only country we have. Like I said, wazungu wako na country mingi wanaweza potelea. People who didn't like Trump when he was elected, some of them fled to Canada, others fled to Australia, others fled to the UK, everywhere in Europe, France. And they can afford to have almost a similar standard of living. Us, we can't even now go to South Africa. You've seen what they are doing. And this is our fellow African country. You've seen what they are doing to foreigners in South Africa. You've heard the rhetoric that Trump uses against immigrants. So it's not like you can go to the US, even if you have connections there, and be as comfortable as you would wish. At the back of the mind, you'll always be reminded, this is not home for you. This is not home for you. And don't think that after Trump is gone and a Democrat wins or whoever, that things will change. Trump has changed the conversation permanently. There will never again be a time when immigration to the West will be as free as it was for the last 10, 15 years. Those days are gone. The rhetoric in Europe is the same. They are saying, we want back our country. And you can't blame them. Because Frequently, you hear Africans saying, Africa is for Africans. So, if Africa is for Africans, what prevents Europeans from saying Europe is for Europeans? So, even if you went there a long time ago and settled, got a residency, then got citizenship, these things can always change. These things can always change. If the situation gets so bad, they can always change the laws. They've changed before, and they cannot be trusted. They can change again. One of the most striking historical examples of how reversals can happen is Spain. Spain, for 700 years, was under the rule of North Africans and Arabs. 700 years. But then after so you'd think that 700 years is so long that nothing can change. But after 700 years, the Spanish rose and kicked out the North Africans and Arabs. And Spain became Spanish again. So your country is your country. It's the only place you can ever be safe. So it doesn't matter whether you left, whether you're planning to leave, you cannot afford to be apathetic about Kenya if you are a Kenyan. You cannot afford it. And in any case, even if you leave, you're not going with your entire family. You leave behind a lot of people you care about. So this is our country, and it is the only country that we have. We don't have any other. We can't go to Uganda. Africans, we are not at that level where we can go to another African country and say now, we can maintain the same standard. You enter Uganda to live under dictatorship. Tanzania, you see what they're doing to Kenyans. You can't go to Congo. You can't go to North Africa. You can't go to West. You can't go to Nigeria. That is like, you can't. So this is the only country where we can. And because we have conditions, I know it's very demoralizing to be told that you're the generation that will fight for the next fight. Everyone wants to go to be born in a country where things are already settled, where you can just focus on your life, where the rules are clear, where the law is settled. But we don't have that luxury. This is our fight. We have to spend time thinking about these issues and try. If not us, if not me, ask yourself, if not me, who? We can't all go to Germany. We can't all go to Europe. We can't all go to US. And you see for yourself where the world is going. The other day, I went to Kakuma. Kakuma is in Turkana County. I decided I wanted to see how people up north in Turkana live. And I went to Lodwa, to Dokcha, and then to Kakuma. Kakuma is a refugee camp. We have like 500,000 people, refugees, living in Kakuma. And what I saw in Kakuma, I think it opened my eyes about what is going on in the world. Because Kakuma has been a refugee camp since 1992. It was started to accommodate refugees from South Sudan. At that time, it was just Sudan. Now, all these Western organizations, NGOs, of course, starting with the biggest one, UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, with the support of USAID, they settled in Kakuma. And there's a big NGO industrial complex in Kakuma to deal with all these refugee issues, education, health, settlement, all these. There's a lot of issues that revolve around refugee life. So since 92, all these Western NGOs have been in Kakuma, employing thousands and thousands of Kenyans and also thousands of foreigners. And every year, they would ask for a bigger budget because more people kept coming in. So initially, Kakuma was for Sudanese refugees, but over time, people from Somalia, from Ethiopia, from Uganda, from Tanzania, from Rwanda, from Burundi, I even saw people from Congo settled in Kakuma as refugees. Okay, technically not refugees, but asylum seekers. And life was not very good, but if they're giving you food, accommodation, and a little bit money to spend every month as an asylum seeker through UNHCR and USAID and all these organizations, that life is better than maybe a lot of these countries. So a lot of people from these countries came. And then a lot of NGOs. One thing with America, once it comes, into even for whatever purpose, for whether for business, whether for aid, it doesn't come alone. And that's the essence of American power. It comes with its allies. So once USAID came to Kakuma, it came with other NGOs from US allied countries. There were British NGOs, French NGOs, Japanese NGOs, Norwegian NGOs, all these countries that, typically walk around with the US. But then in 2024, just the other day, the Americans elect Trump, and the first thing he does is completely shut down USAID. And USAID is the biggest NGO in the world. All these things that were being done in Kakuma, like maybe almost 70% of the budget usually came from the United States. UNHCR itself, the UN Agency for Refugees, its funding comes from the United States. That too was cut down by Trump. So if you go to Kakuma right now, a lot of Kenyans have actually lost jobs, and a lot of those refugees wameanza kuambiwa, kama umekuwa hapa miaka mingi, miaka 5, hakuna pesa yako sasa anymore. This is happening because, first of all, countries are starting to look inward. Nobody is coming to save us. Nobody is coming to save Africa. Days of thinking that foreigners or international organizations are going to help you, they are gone. Trump, and you can't blame him. He realized that this aid thing is almost like a scam, because they came here thinking, hii shida ya refugee ni shida ya siku kidogo. After some time, they'll go back to their countries. But every year, give us more money. Every year, give us more money. That business has been shattered. Imefungwa kabisa. And you'll start to see issues of refugees becoming, a political issue in Kenya, because there's a very big one in Kakuma, and there's another big one in Dadaab that deals with refugees mainly from Somalia. So days of foreigners, Westerners, helping Africans are over. We are on our own. We are on our own, and they don't want us in their own countries. So, my dear friends, either we try or we die trying. There is no other way. There is no other choice. So that has been the politics show. I'll see you again next week. But next week, Tuesday, we are starting our new history series, the neighborhood series. The neighborhood series, I said, we'll look at how the countries in our neighborhood affect us, how they have affected us and continue to affect us, but pia how we affect them. We'll start with Somalia, which is the biggest security threat, the country that has given us the most trouble. The neighborhood series will run alongside the Great Historical Mystic series that will cover the history show. For the politics show, starting next week, I will begin by looking at each of the presidential candidates that I have declared and what they offer and their chances. Of course, we'll start with the incumbent, his vision for this country, and his chances. Then we'll move on to the rest, but also at the same time, analyzing political issues that are happening currently. So thank you so much for listening and watching. I really appreciate. Please make sure you share, you comment, subscribe, and hit the bell button. I really appreciate your viewership. I hope to see you next week. I wish you really well, and I wish you peace and love and God's blessing. God bless you. See you next week, inshallah.